Hi, I'm Mark David Gerson. Welcome to Stories and Reflections, where my stories are also yours. A few weeks ago in episode 3, I talked about the inconvenient truth. An inconvenient truth was a title of that episode, The Inconvenient Truth of My Birth. That Sidney Gerson, the man whose last name I bear, wasn't my birth father, and that I only discovered that fact, was told that 16 years after his death and a few months after my mother's death. I won't repeat that whole story here. You can always go back and listen to that episode. Again, episode 3. What I want to talk about today is Sidney Gerson, my father. Because even if he wasn't my biological father, or frankly, to my child's mind, any kind of a father, he was my father, and he was my father for a reason. So Sidney Gerson. Sidney Gerson was born in Montreal in 1912 to Jacob and Dora Gerson, immigrants from Russia or maybe Lithuania. Now, I don't know a whole lot about Jacob and Dora's past, but by the time I was born, Jacob was the owner of a successful business in Montreal's rag trade, the schmata business, as we would say in the Jewish community. Sidney was, I think, the second oldest of the family of 6. I say I think because 2 of his siblings died young, and I'm not sure whether they were older or younger than him. I don't know much about that history either. We weren't all that close to the rest of the Gersons when I was growing up. But I do know that the siblings died because they were sick in some way. Sidney, too, wasn't perfectly healthy. He was diabetic, a condition that worsened over the years. So much so that most of my memories of him are from the last few years of his life when he was hospitalized in a long-term care facility. That's where he died, in the Grey Start Hospital in East End, Montreal, a few months before his 57th birthday, and a few months before my 14th. And I have very few memories of him from before that time. One memory, and you know what, it may not even be a real memory or my memory, because it's based on an old photo, and it has me on a tricycle with my father's hand on my shoulder. But you know what? Now that I think of it, I'm not even sure that that's me in the photo. It could be my older sister, Susan. It could have been the brother with Down syndrome who died before he was 10, who died before I was born. The only other memory, and this one may also not be entirely accurate, came up during a meditation, a sort of childhood regression I did about 30 years ago. And in this resurfaced memory, if that's what it was, my father is spanking me pretty viciously until my mother stops him. Did that really happen? In my physical life, I really can't be sure. But in my emotional life, absolutely. Now, if you remember from the Inconvenient Truth episode, whatever Sidney might have known or not have known about my true parentage, my biological parentage, he would have to have known that I wasn't his, not biologically. And from the moment I discovered that a few months after my mother died, again, I talk about that in the Inconvenient Truth episode, it explained my perception of his distance, his emotional distance, and my sense of the lack of any kind of real father-son relationship. To be fair, my father was ill during most of the time I remember him, during most of my growing up years, and that could well have influenced his attitude toward me, or at least my perception of his attitude toward me, and my perception of our relationship or lack of relationship. For many years, my sense of my father was a combination of emotional void and, frankly, of burden. Here's why. Through his final couple of years, while he was a full-time resident at the Grey Start Hospital, my mother, sister, and I would trek out every Sunday afternoon to visit him. I don't use the word trek lightly. We had no car then, and it was a 3-bus, 60 to 90-minute journey each way from our house to the hospital. Every week, week in and week out. And that triggers another memory of him. He was already full-time in the Grey Start when I had my bar mitzvah in 1967, but he was able to come to the service. Now here's an interesting aside that's not entirely related to the story, unless maybe it is. My birthday is in October, but the bar mitzvah was on November 11th. 11/11, as many of you may know, is often viewed as some kind of portal. And of course, a bar mitzvah, traditionally, is a child's portal into manhood. But back to my father at that synagogue service. My memory is of me standing on the bima, the raised platform from which the service is conducted, about to sing my Torah portion, and I see my father at the back of the congregation, sitting in a wheelchair, a white-clad orderly standing next to him. It's funny, or maybe not, that should be one of the most vivid memories I have of that day. And another aside, that Torah portion turned out to be astoundingly prescient in terms of how my life would unfold. But that is a story for another day. And the other powerful memory I have of him is of the day he died. It's not really a memory of him, it's a memory of that day. It was a summer Sunday in 1968, and as usual, my mother was organizing us for the journey out to the hospital. On this Sunday, however, hugely out of character for the compliant 13-year-old I generally was, I refused to go. I insisted that I would spend the afternoon with my best friend Gary, who lived a few blocks away. My mother argued, but I was adamant, again, uncharacteristically so. And so my mother and Susan went to the hospital, and I walked over to Gary's. Late that afternoon, Gary's mother gets a phone call from my mother, asking her to have me walk up the street to my cousin's house and to wait there for her. And a few hours later, Susan and my mother turned up, driven there by one of my uncles. Only then did I learn the reason for the change of plans. My father had died that afternoon of a heart attack. Had I somehow known something was about to happen that afternoon, and that it would be best for me not to be present? Had he somehow known and signaled to me to stay away? All I know is that I wasn't there when he died. Interestingly, coincidentally, I also wasn't in the room when my mother died 16 years later. She'd already been in the hospital for several days, in and out of consciousness, at the end stages of terminal cancer. I got to the hospital late that Monday morning and sat with her until the end of the afternoon when my sister arrived from work. Susan popped into the room for a few minutes, and the two of us went down to the hospital cafeteria for dinner. When we got back, no more than 30 minutes later, my stepfather was standing outside the room, stooped and pale. My mother had died minutes after we had gotten into the elevator. Had both my parents, each in their own way, conspired to make sure I didn't see them die? It seemed more obvious with my mother. And to be honest, I hadn't really considered my father to be a participant in my absence that Sunday until now. I had no conscious spiritual awareness when either parent died, but by 8 years later, after my mother died, I did. And around that time, I happened to be going through some old files when I came across letters, just a few, that my father had written to me while I was in summer camp. I'm thinking he probably wrote them a year or two before he died. I didn't remember those letters until I came across them, and when I reread them all those years later, I was struck by how astoundingly impersonal they were, all the way down to the sign-off, which I would have expected to say something like, "Love Daddy" or "Love Dad." Instead, one said, "Yours sincerely." Another one said, "Kind regards." At the time, I was just opening up to my creativity, and those letters triggered a couple of poems. Here's one of them. Yes, I wept when you died, but not for my father, not my father. My tear mourned a vision, a dream, a child's fancy, of warmth and touch and love, not kind regards, and yours sincerely. Whatever its merits as a poem, there's lots of hurt there. But despite everything I've just shared with you, this is not an episode about anger, hurt, pain, or resentment. It's an episode about resolution, reconciliation, and forgiveness. So let's cut ahead to August 1997. I'm on the open-ended road odyssey from Toronto that will, in about 6 weeks, drop me in Sedona and radically revolutionize my life. Of course, I don't know that this journey will come to an end in just over a month. All I know is that I'm in the Shiloh Inn in Boise, Idaho, that I had my first ever experience of channeling the night before, and that I decide to take advantage of one of the features of many Shiloh properties, an old-fashioned steam room. So I'm sitting in the steam room, clouds of opaque steam swirling around me, and I'm alone in the steam room. Or at least, I think I am. My eyes are closed, and I'm breathing in the steam when suddenly I sense another presence in the room. I open my eyes and peer through the clouds of steam, but I see no one. I shut my eyes again, and immediately, in my mind's eye, I sense a white-robed man staring at me through the steam. "Who are you?" I ask silently. "My name," I sense rather than hear, "my name is Arctur." Not Arthur, Arctur. Of course, I figure my mind is playing tricks on me. But then I sense him speaking again. "This is no trick," he says. "I am Arctur." Okay. So we converse in this sort of mind link, or rather heart link kind of way for a few minutes. And then, out of the blue, he says, "There is someone here who wants to speak with you." So I wait. And he continues, "Because this is so close to the anniversary of your father's death," and suddenly I sense my father's presence, Sydney's presence. My heart starts to race. And I hear, or again, sense. I don't hear the words in my ears. I feel the words in my head, in my body, in my being. And my father says, "I'm sorry I couldn't be the father you wanted me to be. I'm sorry I couldn't be there for you in all the ways you deserved." I start to sob. "But I loved you and I still love you," he continues. "And I'm so proud of what you're doing and what you're becoming. I couldn't be a role model for you, but you're now a role model for me. I'm watching you. I'm with you. I'm learning from you. Thank you." Moments later, I sense that Sydney and Arctur have left. I'm alone with the steam, still crying. I open my eyes, wipe my face, collect myself, and return to my room. And when I get into the room, I wonder, well, how close is this actually to the anniversary of my father's death? And I keep a file of significant dates on my laptop, and so I fire up my laptop and look it up and discover, to my amazement, that it's as close to the anniversary as it can possibly be, because my father died 29 years ago on this day. Now, the story could have ended there, and for a lot of years it seems as though it did, because whatever residual anger, pain, and resentment I'd been carrying around my father dissolved that evening in the steam room, and all the feelings of not having been loved by him dissolved as well that evening. So yes, the story could have ended that evening in the Shiloh Inn steam room in Boise, Idaho. But it didn't. Last week, prompted by something I read in the book Unstuck by Jennifer Hough, I wrote a letter to my father. The book's full title, by the way, is Unstuck: The Physics of Getting Out of Your Own Way, and Hough is spelled Hough. Jennifer was one of the guest speakers at the boot camp I mentioned in the first episode. And so I wrote this letter. "Dear Daddy, 29 years ago in that steam room in the Boise Shiloh Inn, you apologized to me for what you couldn't be for me when you were alive. You told me how much you loved me and were proud of me. And you told me how grateful you were to me for all I had taught you and shown you. But I realized this morning that I've never reciprocated. I don't know that I ever told you I love you. And I'm pretty sure I've never thanked you for all that you made it possible for me to become. So here goes. I love you. I love who you are now, whatever and wherever that is. And I love you whether or not you or some aspect of you can hear these words. But I love you not only for who you are now and for what you said to me and for what you acknowledged to me in that steam room nearly 3 decades ago. I also love you for who you were back then. Because who you were back then helped create who I am now, who I am today. Who I am today writing these words to you, writing all the words I write, telling all the stories I tell, loving in all the ways I love. We may not be biologically related. We may not have been physically in each other's lives for all that long. We may not even be soul family. But we came together, you and I, for powerful reasons that helped form each of us. And those same reasons, or what resulted from them, helped touch and form so many others, and continue to do so. How can I not be grateful for that? How can I not love you for that? So, Daddy, because biologically related or not, challenging history or not, absences or not, you're still my father. Wherever, whatever, whoever you are now today, thank you. I love you. So if 29 years ago in that steam room felt like a kind of closure, this letter feels like an opening, a new beginning. For him, well, I can't say that, obviously. For me, absolutely. To be clear, I could not reach that place in 1997 or this place today without first having felt deeply all the feelings triggered by my childhood experiences. Resentment, betrayal, anger, feelings of not being loved, of not being valued, of not being enough, feelings of being devalued, feelings of being neglected. I had to feel all that and feel it deeply. I had to write that poem I shared with you earlier, and other poems. I even had to write problematic fathers into some of my fiction. But most importantly, I had to not get stuck there. I had to find a way through and past all those experiences and all those feelings and all the feelings they triggered and get to the other side of those feelings, get to the other side of those experiences. In The Moon Quest, Toshar, the main character, is told, feel your fear, then pass through it to the other side, where your destiny awaits. It's true of fear, of course, but it's equally true of any emotions that threaten to hold us back if we refuse to acknowledge and feel them, if we insist on getting stuck inside them. Ironically, or maybe not, Toshar's father isn't physically present when Toshar hears those words from him. He's missing and presumed dead, and he hears them, experiences them in a vision. And ironically, or perhaps not, I wrote those words 2 or 3 years before my experience in the Shiloh Inn steam room in Boise. A final point. Just as it's important to not get stuck in emotions that hold us back and imprison us in the past, it's just as important to not get stuck in old stories. I had a truly crappy relationship with my father, and I could still be clinging to that. But you know what? Even if he were still alive, that wouldn't be hurting him. Wherever he is now, he's beyond that kind of hurt. But the only person who would have been hurt, who would have been held back by clinging to those emotions, by clinging to that story, would have been me. Now, in that Shiloh Inn steam room, my father helped me to start changing that story. And I'd like to think that I completed the job with a letter I wrote to him last week, the letter I shared with you. So let me leave you with these questions. And these are questions I still ask myself, but other things from my past. What emotions from your childhood or from more recent traumas are you refusing to feel or still clinging to? Whatever they are, is it time to let them go and move on? Not for whoever hurt or traumatized you, for you. And what stories from those events or experiences are you still allowing to define your life? Whatever those stories are, maybe it's time to rewrite them. Not to excuse anyone's past actions or behaviors, but to free you from those past actions and behaviors, because in the end, it's today that matters. It's your freedom from the past that matters. It's you that matters. So free yourself from the past, rewrite your story, and step into a freer future. Thanks for joining me for Stories and Reflections today. I hope you found moments in my stories that touched something in yours. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. And for more of my stories and help telling yours, check out my books at markdavidgerson.com or from online booksellers worldwide. Until next time, don't forget that you're a storyteller too, and keep telling your stories. The intro and outro music for today's episode is Heartwarming by Kevin MacLeod from Incompetech.com, licensed under Creative Commons.